Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to NJ4K with my guest, Eva Webb, the anti-fascist nerd queen from Twitter and Gals of Geekdom, I believe. Yes,
That's true. That's me.
tell us about your website.
Okay, so I'm in a whole bunch of places. I'm on the Nerd Pick Strangers podcast. I'm on Gals of Geekdom, and if you look up Eva Webb on YouTube in the near future, you're going to be able to find my new podcast called, I think it's Web of Eva, which I thought was kind of a neat play on words. Get it? Eva Webb.
That's a good play on words. I like that. All right. So today we are discussing. I'm going to spend the next hour or so discussing Lovecraft Country, the series, and its rather shocking finale, season 1. And wow, wasn't it one a hell of a finale, huh?
It was crazy. I did not see that ending coming a mile away. Could not have predicted it.
Well, I think that's the whole treat of Lovecraft Country. I never expected a single thing in any of its episodes. The first 2 were very formulaic, and then all of a sudden you had 8 more episodes of just not being what you expect,
It's very healthy. The way it sort of balances this deep social introspection of what American culture is and what it looks like and where it's been and what it does to people. And I feel like that, when you balance it with the magical element and the fact that, that it's sort of a big world with a lot of history and there are monsters. And those monsters aren't always who you expect them to be. That's what's great about it. I will say though that I think I don't know if I really have the best perspective on it. As sort of a white passing Asian girl.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I won't claim I understand me being far too white for me to, to get it all. But I do like how the show. I think the best way to describe the show, friend. I think Jesse Gender described it as the show that likes to hate you, And
sure.
One of the things I actually enjoyed out of it was how uncomfortable it made me as a white person watching it.
Did you feel uncomfortable?
I did, and all for the right reasons as well. It gave me a really good, because we've got to understand, me being British, I had no idea what sunset states were until I moved here, and I had no idea how big they were until I watched Lovecraft Country. Now that's more akin to my European ignorance than it is to my American upbringing, because I'm not American. So. But when I sat down and watched it and saw the social commentary going on there, and I actually felt good feeling uncomfortable about it. I felt good having that social message thrust into my face about what it was like being a black person and what it was like being a white person, in those days, and
Sure.
for me, yeah, it did make me feel uncomfortable, and I'm glad it did. I think that was the whole point. If I'm not uncomfortable with the truth, then obviously you're not doing well enough with the truth.
Yeah, that's true. And there was a lot of truth in there. It's absolutely terrifying. And a lot of this is still going on today. We are not perfect as Americans.
Oh yeah, I have a tab open because I'm doing research on sunset states that are still going on today. It's really, for a country that says racism is dead, racism is dead. The last 4 years have shown us otherwise. In fact, to be honest with you, the last 12 years have shown us otherwise.
I don't think racism's dead. I don't think we're even close.
In fact, In fact, there are a lot of people that think that America's made made this made these strides in improvement in race relationships. You know, it went from slavery to freeing the slaves, then letting them do letting them have normal lives, then moving on up after that, and then giving them the vote later on. Well, actually, what happened was they did give the black community the vote. I think in 1862. And then the white community lynched the people that were elected, and they took that vote away from them. So it wasn't this evolution of things getting better. It was this chaotic example of how ridiculous America is with regards to race relations. And then we had the first black American president, and people are saying, "Oh, racism is dead because we got our first black American president." And I'm kind of going, "No, it's just made the racists louder because they're angry that a black man isn't."
And you're absolutely right. And the other thing about it was that we like to think that we're on the right side of history. That history is a march that moves ever in a progressive direction, we hope. But stories like this remind us that that's not the case.
No.
We go 2 steps forwards, we go 3 steps back, we hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean, one episode in particular horrified me. I think it was the Tulsa burnings. And I heard about the Tulsa, the Tulsa riots, the Tulsa burnings, but I had no idea that they blitzkrieged the city. I had no idea they sent in planes to drop bombs on the black community. That just blew my mind.
That was intense and really personal, I think, because you get to see her just watch as her great grandmother just burns right in front of her. That was really something. I don't think a lot of people actually. The funny thing about it is that the Oklahoma riots are not something they teach in schools.
No.
In fact, I think probably 90 to 100% of the white people I know didn't even know that was a thing until Watchmen came out, and then everybody started talking about it, and I'm glad we did. And now we sort of see another dimension of it. What it meant. I really feel like we get a feeling of what it meant to be there in Lovecraft country that we didn't get in Watchmen.
I mean, it's good how they try and put us into the shoes and the perspective of the main characters. But again, like I said, my privilege makes it impossible for me to fully appreciate the situation that they went through, that people still go through today. And then I have to recognize that it's my job to make sure that my privilege is something. Sorry, my cat was about to knock off the internet. I'm sorry. To try and use my privilege to make sure that privilege is not a thing in the world again. And we need shows like Lovecraft Country. We need schools to dare to put Black Lives Matter up in their classrooms. We need we need to take responsibility for what we've done. A lot of people turn around and say, I'm not a slave owner. My ancestors were, but I'm not responsible for my ancestors. I'm saying, no, but you're responsible for the legacy that your ancestors left behind. Your cities were built of the black of slaves. Yeah.
People are really weird about that.
Yeah.
But I think it's something that even people of color need to think about. We need to think about where we are now. We need to understand where we came from. And I really think that if you're not seriously sitting there and trying to think about all of these things in the context of how to build a better and more just world, you're missing the point.
Yeah. And the one thing I loved about the series was what we would normally call monsters, the actual monsters, the actual creatures in there were not the bad guys. We didn't have a single monster in there other than those two girls that were the bad guy. Even the two demon girls were tools in a way, but there weren't any bad monsters in this series. It wasn't what you expected. Everything was humans were the bad guys.
I tell you, I was more scared of the cops than I was of
Yeah,
the vampire devil dogs in the first episode.
yeah,
Those cops were scary.
yeah. The sheriff in the first episode was the one that scared me more than the monster. The vampire dogs. And I was going, I'm sorry, I'm like I said, in your show, being a former cop, I kind of cheered when that demon dog ripped the Chicago cops apart because of what they were doing, and I'm not one who supports writing per se or violence per se, but I also understand that Martin Luther King said that riot is the language of the voiceless. Eventually there comes a point where there's no other, where there's nothing else you can do except riot.
Right. And the thing is, I mean, everybody wants people to be civil. Everybody clutches their pearls and talks about how bad rioting is. But the thing they're ignoring is that um, people have been protesting this very thing in America for the last 130 years.
Yeah.
That's how long it's been.
Yeah.
And nothing has changed.
Yes.
Black neighborhoods are still over policed. Black people are still over criminalized. It is
Yep.
literally destroying an entire ethnic group in America, and it's profoundly unfair.
Well, Occupy Democrats posted up a meme saying they had absolutely no idea how many undesirable and racist people there were in the country until Trump came into power. And I was like, newsflash, the rest of the world knew. We were very aware of how racist America was. We've been telling you for decades, and the fact that, and the Democrats of all people, progressive groups that I know of, didn't know how many racist people there were in America. Kind of shows you how ignorant America's base as a whole on both the right and the left actually are.
Well, I think our generation made a really big mistake.
Yeah.
When the 1990s came around, we all got this crazy idea in our heads, and maybe this was our privilege collectively.
Mm-hmm.
But we all got this idea in our heads that, everything's over. This is the end of history. There's nothing else to do. This is as good as it's ever going to get.
Yeah.
So why bother? And I think that was a huge mistake. We threw away a lot of time that we could have used to solve some of this stuff.
Yeah, I'm a kid of the 80s, and so many people tell me how good the 80s were. I'm saying, yeah, we had some good material shit back then. We invented we invented personal music. Where you could just plug yourself in and walk down the street with a Walkman and stuff like that. We invented, that was our generation. But what people forget is how incorrect the 80s were as well. We would use the derogatory F word in a kids movie.
Yeah.
In a kids movie. British TV would make Jewish jokes.
Yeah, they still do that.
Yeah, and apparently we had this show in Britain called It Was Okay in the 80s. So you got people who are actually in these shows in the 80s looking back at their shows and going, oh my God, did I really do that? Did I really find this funny? It's terrible. You
Oh
know,
yeah. I was just today. I was a friend of mine was talking about music from the '90s,
yeah,
and she was talking about the albums that she likes and stuff like that. And I was listening to some of them. I was like, oh yeah, that one album was great, and I pull it up, and I forgot. I had totally forgotten about some of the humor in it.
yeah,
Like references to F slurs and hermaphrodites and stuff like that. All under the guise of comedy. It was a comedy album,
yeah.
um, and I just I don't know why I didn't even notice these things at the time. Um, but now I have to wrestle with the fact that it's problematic media. Um, I guess I still feel nostalgic for it, but on the other hand, I really have to sort of sit there and just sort of understand that if stuff like that was released today, um, I would be upset. I would be on Twitter yelling about it.
Yeah, well, it's like how you go on 80s Facebook posts, and some people say, "Oh, we weren't offended back in the day when we were watching this show and that show, but today everybody's a snowflake." And I'm like, yeah, it's kind of typical that a white guy is posting, is posting that they weren't offended in the 80s. You know,
Well, it's like so. I hate to, bring up my trans experience again because I feel like I
of
do that a
course.
lot when I'm talking to you.
Well, it's
Um,
important. So, and
oh yeah, well it
it,
sort of informs everything I
yeah,
do really. So like, I don't remember the '80s very well because I was too young, but
yeah,
I do remember the '90s, and I remember when I was about 20 years old, and I want to say it was either 90, somewhere between '94 and '96. I was, you know, absolutely petrified of coming out, just because of the way that trans people were treated, and largely that, a big thing that I had to cope with, and that I didn't even really even come to terms with, I don't think, until fairly recently, in the grand scheme of things, was all of the internalized transphobia that I had to deal with.
hmm
Um, but the thing I was really scared of back then was, if I did come out, um, what would happen? I mean, I was worried about, not being able to get hired, not being able to work a real job or have a real career, and you know, so and the other thing that trans people had to deal with was, doing sex work as a career because that's the only thing they could do at the time. I mean,
hmm
it's gotten so
yeah,
much better in terms of trans rights and equality and stuff like that. Um, but it is scary when some of these people talk about transphobia, and when you do see transphobia in the media. Um, you got to remember there are trans kids out there today
hmm yeah,
who are still on the edge and seeing these depictions of trans people that are villains, that are scary, that are evil. The thought that goes through their head is, okay, then I'm just not going to come out until this is over, you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
and that could be decades if they make it that long.
yeah. Look at how they're trying to rush through the current SCOTUS right now, and it's pretty clear where it stands. I can't give this person identity because she refuses to give people of less privilege than her identity. That probably sounds very insulting, but I can't give this the current SCOTUS pick identity. I refuse to at this point. Um,
I think that's perfectly valid.
yeah,
The thing you look, and this is where I get yelled at
mhm,
in trans circles.
yeah,
But if you're talking to a fascist, and let's not mince words,
yeah,
if you're talking to a religious fundamentalist fascist who will not deal you the courtesy of calling you what you are called,
Hmm.
and existence is a point that is absolutely not negotiable in my worldview.
Yeah.
Um, then you can call them whatever you want.
Yeah.
Usually something laced with profanity, because that's where I go with it.
Yeah.
Um, Also, when they're being an asshole and they have no, you know, um, when they have no pronouns in their bios, if they're being intolerant, I'll just you know
Well,
guess.
I think it's kind of like people, people are kind of like, oh, so much for the tolerant left, blah, blah, blah. I said, there is nothing tolerant about me. I am about as intolerant as you can get when it comes to fascism, when it comes to bigotry, when it comes to racism, when it comes to, to homophobia and transphobia. That's it. I can get very, very intolerant. Never, ever describe me as a tolerant lefty because you're going to be disappointed, you know? So, you know, there's a difference between tolerating something that you know that just is and can be, and then there is tolerating something that is just completely intolerable, wanting the genocide of an entire race or a sexuality or gender just wiped out of existence. That's not something you tolerate. There's nothing to tolerate about that. There's nothing to tolerate about white supremacy, or the fact that there's nothing to tolerate about anybody who doesn't think that a black person's life matters. There's nothing to tolerate about those kind of people. So I think it's a big mistake on the right's part to even accuse me of even trying to be tolerant. You know?
Why would you be tolerant of people who want to see um,
Yeah,
other people hurt or deprived of rights or dead? It
yeah.
doesn't make sense to me.
It makes no sense to me that people want that anyway. That is a reality that really surprised the hell out of me. Why would anybody wish that? In fact, I remember asking when I did I think on hold on a second, don't. When I did a thing on race relations in geek fandom, I asked my audience, which was largely white. I asked them, so how many of you would want, in today's day and age, want to live like a like a black person? And none of them put their hands up. And I said, now ask yourself, why did none of you put your hands up? And the whole point was because they don't have the respect or the rights that they as white people have, and that has to change. They need
Well, I
that.
think everybody, I think
Yeah,
absolutely everybody is cognizant of the fact that privilege exists,
yeah,
and that people benefit from privilege, even if that privilege is not being harassed on a daily basis
yeah.
because you have the right skin color.
I mean,
They know this.
yeah,
They know this. They're aware of it, even if they deny it.
yeah. I mean, what gets me is that there, everybody turns around and says, "Oh, that, back in the day, when segregation was a thing, and when sons, that was the thinking, that was how it was." I'm kind of like, and I'm kind of like, we want, it was for the best, everybody thought it was for the best. I'm kind of going, no, 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 it wasn't. Nobody thought that this was for the best. Not one person thought that it was for the best. It was just designed to be cruel for the sake of being cruel. Not allowing somebody to sit on a bus was cruel. Having sunset states and sunset cities is cruel. That's it. There is,
And then there's the injustices of redlining.
yeah,
Um, One thing to point out though is that the redlining didn't just happen to African Americans.
mm-hmm,
It happened to Asians. It happened to Jews.
mm-hmm,
Um, if you were Jewish, you know, um, which is a fairly light-skinned group, all things considered, um, you could not live in a white neighborhood. You could not do it, and that's why there were so many. That's why so many black neighborhoods in New York City, for example, and other places
yeah,
are also big Jewish neighborhoods as well.
yeah. It's I mean, I used to live in Chicago about 3 or 4 years ago, and it was a nice city, but what really horrified me was how segregated it is. It's a very segregated city. You know, there is a huge contrast between the north and the south. You know, and I did a lot of my acting work down in the south, largely because of how abandoned it was. You know, you had a whole group of people who were just left to the sidelines by the city council. You know, and the amount of policing down there was shocking. You know, and you know, I'm British. We have our race relation problems in Britain as well, but I have never seen segregation to this, you know, to the state that I have when I moved to America. I've never seen anything like I have in America, and I thought I only heard these stories about South Africa, you know, and it's going on here. You have apartheidism here in America right now. It's shocking to me, and I've been here 16 years. And I still cannot register it.
Yeah, I completely understand. It's a part of life, and I think the only way that you don't see this injustice is if you choose not to see it.
Yeah,
Conservatives in general have this view where they look at a problem and they evaluate if it's their problem or not.
yeah,
You know, and if it's not their problem, it's not a problem.
yeah,
It's just the way it goes. And this is the way their vacuum chambers work, the way their worldview is. They only care about the things that affect them directly. There's no sense of human decency. There's no sense of empathy for anybody else. They just want to get theirs, and to hell with everyone.
okay. Well, let's move on a little back to Lovecraft Country itself. Would you define it as a supernatural show or a social commentary show?
You know, that's interesting. I think in general, it's it's sort of a supernatural show. It's sort of a sciencey sci-fi type show.
Hmm.
They've explored some really interesting territory, but more than that, um, I think the piece that's really important about it, and what makes it such a breakthrough, is the social commentary.
Yeah, I mean, I think practically every community as a whole. I mean, it touched the white community, the black community, the gay community, the trans community. It was, you know, it did. In fact, did you know that the writer apologized for the treatment of the dual gender character recently?
Oh, good. No,
Yeah,
I did not know that.
yeah. They said she admitted it was the wrong thing to do. It was totally insensitive how it was handled. And I'm kind of like, I give you credit for that, because I remember in the original interview they said, "Oh, we're pretty sure we're probably going to upset people with that scene, but we'll deal with it when it happens." Okay, that is just a really cold reading way of dealing with it. And
Yeah, but I
that
mean,
really made me
but
angry when they said that.
yeah, but I mean, it's a little less offensive though.
Yeah,
When you consider, where that character was coming from, who he is. I mean, it was the very next episode that we learned um, that not
mm,
only is he the main character gay, but
yeah,
he's struggling with his queerness and has been his entire life in a world that is especially unforgiving, in a
yeah,
community that is horrifying in the way that they treat people like that. So I think it's still horrifying, but it makes sense in context.
it does make sense in context. It just kind of for me, being queer as well, it kind of like um, but we had discussions in our last thing about how I feel media treats the queer and the LGBTQ community, and doesn't quite understand where we're coming from. You know what I'm saying?
That's true.
Especially largely as a lot of shows are written by straight guys who think that they're writing groundbreaking LGBTQ characters, and you're kind of like, oh my goodness, how do I explain this? You know, like the 90s, the late 90s had this run of gay characters coming out in their shows, but they all turned out to be hot actress women sleeping with other hot actresses, hot actresses, and we're kind of like, it's nice to see
It's
that
so
you're doing,
brave.
yeah, it's nice to see you trying to do this LGBT, but really what you're doing is just softcore porn at this point. You're going down this fraternity approach to lesbianism and and LGBTQ issues. You haven't quite got it,
Yeah, but on the other hand, I think, part of that is just sort of the way the culture works at that
Yeah.
point. They could not, they wanted to attack the issue, but on the other hand, they could not address it in a realistic way because the audience would have walked out.
Yeah, I mean,
Back then you still had fundamentalist Christians
yeah.
in an awful lot of power. Even in the media, they had a lot. They still have a lot of spending power to this day. But back then, they were a force to be reckoned with.
I mean, they handled it as well as they could with Willow in Buffy the Vampire Slayer. They pushed a lot of edges with that relationship, I think, But then they went down the trope of making her the lesbian bad guy, which really ground me at the time.
I bet.
Yeah, I saw, I said, oh, it's a beautiful relationship. They handled it quite well, and then they turned her into the bad guy, and I'm like, God, you really went there, didn't you? How, God, you were so close, so close. So, let's talk about that conclusion, which I think is really the big crux of it. There was a lot going on, and it almost felt like they were cramming in 3 episodes into one final episode. You know what I'm saying?
It did sort of feel like that, yeah.
Where they had to save Dee, then they had to get the ancestor's heart, and then the final conflict at the end. And considering how they spread out the last episodes, everything had one cohesive story, one cohesive event. This one seemed like they crammed in 3 episodes at once, and I was like, wow.
But I liked how I liked how fast it moved. I didn't like I didn't like how they killed that one character off screen. I feel like, it was a good reveal, but I would have liked to see a little more there. And Dee at the end with the robot hand, I thought that was absolutely inspired. I can't wait to see more of that kind of craziness.
Well, I'm kind of like, she controls that monster, and she figured that out very quickly. But it's what she said at the end, like, they still don't understand, and I'm like, you're not Dee, are you? What if her possession isn't over? What if there was something more to that curse? Because that really shook me to my core when she crushes her neck with a robotic arm, and she's so cold about it that, as if she knows more about the magic that's been going, because I really do like the end when they said white people don't get magic anymore. I'm like,
that
whoa!
was good.
That way I was cheering at that point. But
they reclaimed it. It belongs to them now, and that was great. That was inspiring.
So the way I look at it, with Dee's character, she is an amalgamation of magic and science now, which is probably the way season 2 is going, I think. Because now that white people can no longer access magic, what else have they got to rely on? And we've seen
That's true.
and we've
But you know, the
seen
white people in the show who used so much magic,
Mhm.
you never once saw them try to help anybody with it. They were
No,
all
it's all about themselves.
self-absorbed, and they used it to hurt other people, to gain power.
Hmm.
They used it for their sadistic ends, and I don't think they deserved it.
No,
None of the black characters in the show ever used magic that way. They were always using it to protect their families. Um,
and to
you know,
protect
they were
others. Yeah.
using it to exactly. They were using it to try to help each other, to save each other. It's a completely different application.
Yeah, I mean the Kitsune episode, for example, where you know the monster is the Kitsune, the nine-tailed fox, and
I love her.
I yeah, and I love how how they've dealt with her arc. We wish we had more time with her, but hopefully in the next season we will. But what they even she was out. She originally she was doing she was doing it to become human, to become human again, but she felt guilty every time it happened. And then she finally found somebody she could help, and she was using the magic to help somebody else, but all the white people, especially the female character, I keep forgetting her name, the main female enemy. She it was all about her immortality, all about what she could get, and um, you know, and I'm glad that that it had that conclusion. I'm glad that it that it just said, I'm not going, we're not going to be kind. If you're going to be selfish and abusive, the story ends with you guys getting nothing. And I like that. I like that. How many times do you
Yeah,
get that kind of that kind of ending?
that's true. That's true.
And I like the subtext in it. It's the subtext, the ultimate warning in it, saying if you guys don't change your ways, the underdog is going to become the overdog. Kind of like the time machine, where the Morlocks were the working class and the Eloi were the were the under were the upper class, but now the underclass. And that was some good subtext there. I saw the time
Oh
machine
yeah.
references, right? Right there. I thought that was really really good. But D, back to D. What do you make of that? What do
hmm
you make of her now?
So I think she was possessed by demons and probably ended up in a very very dark place, and we're
Hmm.
going to see that I think in the next season. Just sort of all of the horrendous things that were going on in her head while she was unconscious.
Yeah, like
Also, what did you make of? Did you get the idea that her face was like literally changing to
yeah,
look like one of those demon children, or
yeah,
do you
that yeah.
think that that was just something that the viewer was seeing? I
Oh
wasn't
no,
clear on that part.
no, I saw that. She was turning into one of the dolls as well. I saw that. So as though I mean, it's clear. When you now have this group of people that quite clearly said they don't understand the magic they're dealing with. They still don't fully grasp it, but now they have access to the magic. But so yeah, they exercised something from D, but did they exercise what they needed to from D? And I'm kind of getting the impression that the moral of the story is that magic isn't something that humanity as a whole should be having, because we don't understand it. We don't understand it. Even the grandmother was saying, the great grandmother was saying, in that scene in the burning house, she said she didn't understand the magic, and we don't understand the magic, but we still use it. And so it's going to be interesting. I think the moral of the story is that magic is just as dangerous as science, and maybe magic in this story is an allegory of how we approach science. Just because we can use it doesn't necessarily mean that we should use it. You know what I'm saying?
Oh, totally. Well, what did you think of Hippolyta and the arc there, about how she used the portal and where she was, and
I am
her embedded technology now?
I am a sucker for alternate worlds. That was my Oh yeah, that was my favorite episode. Where she becomes Queen Hippolyta, where she becomes, where she becomes the singer.
That was so much fun.
Yeah, and I am a sucker for anything that involves alternate realities, and the way she becomes this, this Q-like creature. She handled that well. The only thing that got me is that she knows about alternate realities and alternate histories and stuff. Yet to get the book of names, she literally just chose them from their own timeline. I'm kind of, you could have gone through an alternate Tulsa where there wasn't a fire or anything that was about to happen, but no, you chose this particular timeline to get that book. So I understand plot device. I understand plot device. I could tear it apart, easily enough. But it's still kind of like, but. If you're going to do stories on alternate realities, and somebody who knows how to find different realities, she could have found a better place to get that book,
Yeah, that's probably true, but then there's no guarantee that it's the same book.
No, that's true. That's true, because there's always some subtle difference. Like that episode from Sliders where they think they're back in their world because everything is perfect. And then they look at the Golden Gate Bridge and it's the wrong color.
Yeah, well, wasn't that the episode where they get into a portal and they almost slide home and like, no, that can't be it.
Yeah. I'm like, come on, it's close enough. Jeez.
Right, exactly.
Just because the bridge is the wrong color, But yeah. That's yeah. I mean, the Hippolyta episode was my overall favorite, largely because I love alternate realities. I'm a fan of the Man in the High Castle and the Mirror Universe episodes in Star Trek. So,
the Man in the High Castle was great. The thing I enjoyed was I loved the retro sci-fi angle on that particular episode. I thought it was inspired. I thought it was fun to watch.
Yeah.
Also, in this episode, it was fun to see that, to learn that she had been gone for 200 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time. So I'm curious to see what other craziness she's going to cook up later in the show because of that.
Well, it's going to be interesting because I think they've gone through the whole novel. So obviously the second season is... Now, hold on. They had vampires in the novel as well. But it means they're going to go... Yeah, I'm still with you. Yeah, I'm still here. Can you hear me?
Sorry, you went silent there for a second. Can you hear me?
Oh,
okay?
Sorry. Yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I was saying something. So obviously, I found out. It's going to be interesting. I know that there's more to the novel, but it's not a big novel. It's actually a very small novel. So obviously, they're going to have to. Not have done most of the novel except for vampires and stuff. They're definitely going to have to go down an original route. And is the writer still alive? Is the writer of the novel still alive?
I don't know. I loved how self-aware the show is, though. How they actually went forward in time and actually got the novel about their family history.
Yeah.
That was novel. Not just because it was a novel. It's almost a pun. No, it's not quite a pun.
Yeah, that was really well done. So, but yeah, I am looking forward to seeing Matt Ruff. That was Matt Ruff, he's still around. Yeah, so it'd be interesting to see what he puts into. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's going to have some input. Let's hope he has more input than the author of Game of Thrones did on his show, especially with season 8. Oh my goodness.
Game of Thrones.
Oh my
I had
God.
trouble getting into that one.
Hmm.
I know people loved it. I just couldn't sit through it.
I enjoyed Game of Thrones. I mean, it had its ups and downs, but I enjoyed it. But season 8, as my wife will say, was just basically, oh Jesus, why?
Yeah.
So we can't wait for the books, but I don't. But that guy is getting so old, and unlike Frank Herbert, he hasn't got a son to carry on the legacy, So once he's dead,
That's true.
that's it, But yeah, excuse me for saying. Hey, let's not have fights. We have 3 cats in the house, and our girl hates the gray cat.
She hates all.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. So that's the growling you can hear in the background. But yeah, what direction do you think the next season's going to go in?
I think we're going to see more crazy sci-fi stuff. I think we're going to see more monsters. I would like to see a tentacle monster before we're done with the season.
Yeah.
But time will tell. We'll figure it out. What do you think we're going to see?
I think we're going to see a lot more science versus magic in this. I think we're going to see something a little bit like the Flight of Dragons approach to it, where you've got these two worlds of science and magic in contention with each other. And now that the entire white race is no longer has access to magic, they're going to be more and more aggressive in what they do with their science. I mean, we've seen science, how the white man is using science to access other realities and other times in this series, and how that. So there's a lot of abandoned old technology out there that we're still not aware of. So I think that's what we're going for in the next season. Science fiction versus magic and fantasy. It's definitely the trope they're going for this time. Because the whole thing, you the underlying thing you see in Lovecraft country is this us versus them mentality, and that's not going to change. And considering it's still in the 50s, moving on into the 60s and 70s now, that's not going to change. One thing I love about this series is that it touches upon issues that America is still ignorant of today, even though it's happened. Everybody thinks that the 60s and the 70s were this, was the civil rights movement, and then the 70s was this lovey-dovey flower girl period, and it wasn't. It was the rise of Nixon, and the rise of Nixon brought about a new form of racism in the country.
It did.
Well, where the where the Republicans went down the Southern tactic, and everybody thinks that Reagan was the best example of an American president. No, he wasn't. The guy was just as racist. He literally called black people monkeys. He recorded. He said these things, and so I really hope that once we start moving on, into these decades, into these periods, we actually, these periods are seen for the dark times they actually are, rather than this nostalgic rose-tinted glasses I have on about the 80s right now.
Sure. Well, we had a lot going on in the 70s. We had social unrest.
Mm-hmm.
We had gasoline supply chain issues, which affected everybody.
Yeah.
There was limited mobility. You had police brutality. You had racism. You had a lot of flagrant abuse by the state. There's a lot to talk about there, I think.
And then in the 80s, you had the AIDS epidemic, the treatments of the gay, the gay community, and it was, about how AIDS was treated as the gay disease rather than,
Right.
and it wasn't. But that's, when I was a kid, when I was brought up, that's how I was taught to believe. I thought it was the gay disease, and this was in a time where sex education in class was very controversial,
Right.
So I would love to see more shows that really break insights into our nostalgia. The so-called American good old days, which
Sure.
I'm still trying to figure out if there were any real American good old days.
I think there's always a fascination with whatever period it is that was about 40 years ago. When we were growing up in the 1980s, they were fascinated with the 1950s.
Mm-hmm.
It was painted as this rosy red nostalgic period. But the fact of the matter is that it was, the 50s was the height of Jim Crow. The 50s was a period of untold abuse. And yeah, I mean, I'm sure there were people like Ward Cleaver and, June Cleaver and those people and Happy Days that had it pretty good. But the rest of us didn't.
Yeah, I mean, one thing I did like about the last episode was they did show some positive change with the way America was moving, like the other black family that moved into the white neighborhood as Tick's new neighbors, and I'm going like, yeah, it's not it's not all negative, there were small movements forward. So it was nice to see that nod to the small changes the small changes that were happening at the time. So, because it did have an overwhelming negative connotation as to how America was, but it also showed the underlying that the black community was making its own strides, its forwards. It was, despite this overshadowing menace of evil over it, there was still some element of light there. So when that small family bought that small house, in the community, and moved into the community alongside Tick and his girlfriend, it was nice to see that kind of positive, that small positive moment in a show that has otherwise been quite dark.
Yeah. But, even then, the house they bought was haunted. And it was even haunted as recently as this last episode. They have not gotten rid of those ghosts.
No.
They are still there. They're still in the floorboards. They're still, making noise in the basement.
Yeah.
So, it was a house that was haunted and that had a reputation for being haunted that literally nobody else wanted.
Yeah.
So I guess it is what it is. They got something, but how much did they really get in the end?
Yeah. So, how do you think a show like this would affect America today? Because it really came out at the right time is the wrong word, I think. It came out at a very interesting time in our history when people are finally starting to get the, to get the message that Black lives do matter, that there is an underlying problem, with our country right now. And and that it was a strange coincidence that Lovecraft Country comes out at the start of the Portland protests. That was I still can't get over that timing. So how do you think a show like this would affect our way of thinking? Do you think white people are going to sit down and watch this and go, yeah, that's us, yeah, we're the bad guys?
Yeah. I think they should, and I hope they do, because this show is incredibly healthy. It is something that is needed, and it's coming at just the right time. I think it's coming at a time of heightened social awareness post George Floyd, and it's exactly I think what the country needs to see right now, it may not be comfortable for a lot of people, especially white people that are really, really hung up on their privilege, especially white people who want to put, and for good reason, they want to put the past behind them, but the problem is that the past is still there for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh, uncounted people. And that's what the show is getting at. So I don't think this is going to affect conservatives much at all, but I really think that people who are truly conservative are a shrinking minority in
I do
America.
too. Yeah.
Um, so the rest of us, I think, are really gonna have a good time with it.
Oh yeah.
We're going to do that self-reflection. We're going to do that healthy catharsis, and hopefully, grow as people. I think everybody who watches this is better for doing it. What do you think?
I think so. I mean, have some doubts because I look at the Star Trek fandom, and we had this conversation about how it's been how right wingers are hijacking that these days.
Yeah.
I mean, Star Trek was supposed to be about, was supposed to be this bastion of multiculturalism, and you still have right wingers say, speaking out, speaking out against other races and other sexualities and other genders, and you kind of like, I can see Lovecraft Country. Lovecraft Country has this ability to make you uncomfortable, especially if you are that kind of person, But at the same time, I would, as much as I would like to believe that it can change a conservative if they sat down and watched it. Star Trek hasn't changed a lot of conservatives, and like I said, I still don't understand how you could be conservative and like Star Trek or like Babylon 5 or Battlestar Galactica, and even Battlestar Galactica, for all its totalitarianism in the new series, spoke out a lot against totalitarianism.
That was the joy of it. The Battlestar Galactica, at least this most recent one, was an existential look at totalitarianism and the cost of progress.
Yeah.
Yeah, all of it. I thought it was fantastic, and I liked the weird spiritual bent at the end too.
Yeah.
I liked all of it.
But what I liked about it was, so go on.
Oh, I was just going to point out that I really liked your love letter, or I guess it was more of a breakup letter to the Star Trek community.
Yeah.
I thought it was beautiful and pissy, and you're doing something right when you're downvoted 3 times as much as you're upvoted.
Oh my God, yeah, that was
by these assholes.
Video, and I'm like, and I sent it to those guys particularly, so I knew that was going to be a downvoted video.
Well, the thing they don't realize is that when they downvote, they're actually still driving engagement on the video up and making you more powerful. There's nothing they can do to hurt your video.
Oh yeah, I actually, to be honest with you, that's one of my favorite videos. When I was writing that out, I was kind of like, how can I make this as ironic and as insulting as possible, but at the same time funny? I'm like, yeah. One thing I constantly say about life is how it sucks but never swallows. That's basically the Star Trek fandom, isn't it?
I thought it was beautiful, and I wish honestly that more people did videos like that, because it was outstanding.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not normally a negative guy, but I do kind of get deeply involved in political issues like this, or especially so some people think I get a little too much into Star Trek arguments, but the people I'm arguing with, Star Trek wise, are literally the Trump supporters. Are literally the people that.
Well, these are people that are trying to co-opt Star Trek. They're trying to co-opt every form of media. They dislike everything that's good without knowing anything about it. They call themselves the Fandom Menace now. They've called themselves Comicsgate in the past. Before that, they were calling themselves Gamergate. It is all the same guys from start to finish, and the policy that they're pushing. this co-opting of existing fandoms to sell their neo-Nazi propaganda. It's offensive, and I really wish we, as a fan community, that we did more about it. Because these guys are being allowed to thrive simply based on how inclusive the traditional fan community has been. They've never kicked anybody out for not knowing anything. They've never told anybody that their politics are a reason you can't be a fan. But what I'm saying, theoretically, and what I've been saying for over a year now, is that I don't know, maybe we should have standards as far as who's allowed in these fan communities. These are guys who want us to be tolerant of, co-opting the community to spread some very, very bad ideas to some potentially very, very impressionable people.
Yeah.
And that worries me a lot.
Yeah, it worries me too. I mean, I remember when I put up a picture of Optimus Prime with an LGBT flag, saying freedom is the right of all sentient beings, which is his policy. Beautiful. Yeah, and then you had Transformers fans getting pissed off about it and said, define irony. A bunch of bigots getting upset about a non-binary robot that changes his appearance, protecting LGBT rights.
Well, that's true, because the Transformers, they are not biological. Gender for them is even more arbitrary than it is for us.
Yeah. And they change their appearance. Unbelievable. Like, what is your...
Yeah, they're literally called Transformers.
Yeah. I'm like, wow, really? Oh, dear.
I only believe in more than meets the eye if it's something I can see,
Yeah. So, it's... But you're right. I would hope that Lovecraft Country can change minds, can change points of views, but I have seen such stubbornness. I hope my faith, my lack of faith, can be dissuaded. You know what I'm saying?
I feel you.
I mean, in 2016, I never expected to see a racist. There have been racist presidents before, but I've never expected to see something so blatantly totalitarian or racist that I've seen elected to the office, and it happened. So, reality has this habit of shattering my privileged point of view, which is a good thing. It needs to do that,
It really bothers me, though, when people you love fall in the hole of stochastic terrorism. These far right views that start off as something reasonable, like, oh, I think we should just have better comics, or maybe the writing on Doctor Who isn't so great, or maybe Star Trek should stick to canon a little more. On the surface, those things don't seem so bad, but when you start diving in, the next thing you know, they're talking about, how much they hate women, or how trans people aren't people, or stuff like that, and it goes down from there. And
or they complain that we have Discovery's got trans representation. Didn't we already have that in Star Trek: The Next Generation? And I'm like, and what's wrong with more of it?
The thing is, the problem is that it's not just abstract random strangers that this is happening to, that are falling for this. My dad has been a traditional conservative for a very long time, and there isn't a day that goes by that I don't worry about him falling into Comicsgate or something similar.
Mm-hmm.
If he hasn't told me. He knows better.
Yeah, it's that.
But it is something I worry about.
Well, it's like my parents who taught me everything I know about the Holocaust. but then go down exactly the same route with how the Nazis treated the Jews and the gay community, by how they talk about Muslims and about how they release propaganda that lies about Muslims and about how they support Brexit, and believe it or not, are also Trump supporters as well, and they're British. So
I'm sorry.
the irony is that they taught me everything I knew about. I know about how the Holocaust happened, rightfully so, and I'm grateful that they did that. But what makes me so angry is how they can't see that they're doing exactly the same things they taught me about. You know, and it's I'll never understand the conservative mindset.
I think the lesson here is that it's really easy to see the horrible conclusions after the fact, but nobody going into it ever has their eyes open. They can't see these things ahead of time.
Well, that said, we have to remember that there were people who literally saw the trains go by. They knew where they were going and they knew what was going to happen to them. I have to accept that my parents would be the bakery who saw the trains go by and did nothing to feed, did nothing to help them, did nothing to save these people. My parents would be the kind of person. My parents would be the kind of person that would report. If we were going to do this to Muslims, if we were to start rounding up Muslims and putting them into death camps, my parents would be the first person to report a family hiding them. And I have to accept that is a very hard thing for me to accept at this point. And I don't mind saying that publicly. I hope they hear this. I want my parents to understand exactly where they're going. So if they're listening to this, I'm talking directly to you. You're no better, you are no better. I'm sorry, Mum and Dad, but you are no better than the people you told me to hate in the first place. Sorry, do go on.
No, I think you're right. But the thing you got to remember about Nazi Germany in particular was that the Holocaust didn't just come out of nowhere. This was decades of bad policy, of conservative agendas. If you look at, the first time Jews were put in concentration camps in 1920s, the debate was very partisan. And it looked an awful lot like the debates about concentration camps and putting immigrants in that we had just a year and a half ago. So the problem is, I think, just ignorance of history. When people bring up the Holocaust in particular, I understand that it's hard for a lot of people. It's hard for me. My grandfather narrowly survived Auschwitz. But on the other hand, when we say never again, we have to fucking mean it.
Yeah.
We have to sit there. We have to say, never again means proactively notice the signs, pay attention, even if those signs make you uncomfortable, because it's never safe and it's never over, and we have to be constantly vigilant.
It's like the Doctor Who episode Turn Left, where they're rounding up people, but it turns out that they're not just rounding up anybody; they're rounding up anybody of color or of a certain religion, not white people. And Wilfred Mott says it's happening again, and Donna Noble doesn't quite understand it, because she's still, because she's not the same Donna Noble that traveled with the Doctor. She still has this kind of ignorance about her. But Wilfred Mott says it's happening again, and that's all he needed to say for the rest of us to understand he was making a Holocaust allegory.
Right.
And that to me is probably the most chilling thing about science fiction. The thing I like about science fiction most is that it doesn't have to be in your face to tell you this is what's happening. It has so many different ways to let you know that humanity can go down this dark corner so easily. We can turn dark corners. And like I said, getting back to the election, 2016 was more than just science fiction. That was reality. We turned that dark corner.
And, we could get another 4 years of this, and God forbid if we do. But
Yeah.
I think the whole thing's a lot closer than people are willing to admit right now. I, for one, would like to see this whole chapter in history be over with Trump.
Yeah, we'll know in about 2.5 weeks, but well, we probably won't even know then. But when MSNBC and CNN get overexcited about the polls, that's when I panic.
Yeah, they did last time. And to be fair, Trump did technically win, but Trump was not a popular vote win. He was in the 1970s, the last time they were talking about the popular vote and how the situation we're in now was predictable and a problem, and they tried to solve it but failed. They would have called Trump an unrepresentative president, which is he is a president that was elected by a minority of the people. He had no mandate to lead.
Well, here's the thing. It's like I said, because the Democrats refused to change anything the last time they were in power, we're in this mess now. And now you're going to have Democrats going into power, which is very likely at this point, but they're going to have no way of handling their power because the final arbiters of certain laws will be the Supreme Court. So say the Democrats said we're going to get rid of the Electoral College and it's going to be a popular vote. All the Republicans have to do is take that to a conservative SCOTUS and have that no, the Electoral College is still a thing. So as much as I'm excited about the possibility of a Democratic takeover of the of the House, I'm not excited to the point that what are they going to do to change anything? They literally shot themselves in the foot. They literally destroyed every chance they had of actually making changes that would benefit them, for goodness sake. When they were in power, they didn't do that. They literally squandered an opportunity, and now they've squandered the opportunity for an entire generation.
Well, doesn't it bother you at all, though, that the entire Democratic Party platform today is designed to solve problems that were created by the quote-unquote bipartisan solutions of the Democrats 20 years ago?
Yep. It bothers me a lot, yeah.
Not only that, but, Biden in particular was the spearhead of quite a bit of that, over-policing, private prisons, civil asset forfeiture. The list goes on and on and on. Biden's the last person that I would have wanted. But it's like we said last time we talked, it's a choice between bad or worse or catastrophic. It's a choice between conservative, which, let's be honest, that's what Biden is. I mean, he's very progressive on trans rights, which I do appreciate. But the body of his policy history is extremely conservative by today's standards.
Well,
but the alternative is actual fascism, and it's not a joke. It's time to get serious about this.
Yeah, it's like they say, how Biden is so pro-science. I'm pro-science. I believe in science. Blah 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 blah. But I won't ban fracking. So you're pro-science when it comes to everything else, except the fracking part of science.
Well, where are all these? Okay, so we're supposedly rejoining the Paris Climate Accords, right?
Yeah.
But we don't want to do anything about fossil fuel.
Yeah.
How does that work?
How does that work? It's like once we get if Biden comes back into power, he's going to withdraw. He's going to withdraw our withdrawal of who. So we won't be leaving who on June the 6th. However, and you watched it yesterday as well. I know you did. John Oliver's thing. America is the only country in the world that is allowed to pull out of the World Health Organization. Why? As Oliver would say, and I'm going to swear. This is my channel. I can swear all I like. Why the fuck would a country want to have the right to pull out of an organization that is designed to make the world healthier.
Especially in a way that's unsustainable.
Yeah, we're talking about
you know,
we're talking about an organization that wiped out smallpox, literally
yeah,
wiped it out.
it absolutely did. Not only that, but John Oliver actually had a really good point. And that is, when the American government has tried to do some of these functions in the past,
Yeah.
they've done things like collect people's DNA and then prosecuted them. The world doesn't forget about that. I mean, we're not even trusted here at home with illegal immigrants. What makes you think that we're going to be trusted in the outside world when we go out and behave the way we do? It's ridiculous. It's patently absurd.
It's like my home country, Britain. It's doing exactly the same thing. It's kind of going, we're not going to agree to EU terms, blah, 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 blah. Kind of like, so basically you're breaking the original agreement you came up with when you pulled out of the EU. And I do believe it was Margaret Thatcher that said, Britain does not break deals. Otherwise, its trust in the world will be absolutely shattered. And America, it's almost like Britain and America has had this parallel thing going on since Brexit started, since the Brexit vote. Like America and Britain is going down this path of self-destruction where nobody in the world is ever going to trust you again. Nobody's going to trust Britain again. Nobody's going to trust the United States again. And now Germany is becoming this central paradigm of morality.
Which is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah.
But the thing is that I was just going to chime in there, but I didn't want to interrupt you. Britain's broken all sorts of deals for a very long time. I mean, it's one thing to say we don't break deals while you're breaking deals, but they're as bad or worse than America at this point.
Oh yeah. I mean, only yesterday the Independent said the Queen did a photo op, the photo with the jewel that her father gave her, and we're like, you know what? This changed my life completely. My life is so different now that I know that the Queen used a jewel that her father stole from a less fortunate country to pose to pose for a photo. Oh my God!
Yeah.
Everything, I now have a completely different perspective on my entire life. Thanks for sharing that with me. And then I'm arguing with people who say, "Oh, the royal family bringing money to the country." I'm going, no, they don't. There's no tickets to see the royal family. The royal family doesn't do that. And people come here because of the royal family. Said, okay, two things you've got to remember. First of all, we just bailed out the royal family in the country for apparently losing money. Second of all, what tourism? We're in the middle of a fucking pandemic. Nobody's coming to Britain. Least of all, to see the royals. Okay? So...
That's true.
It just... I don't understand the conservative mindset. I don't understand royalism. I don't understand... I just don't get it at this point. We're talking about systems that are just so out of date they no longer work. And if anything, Donald Trump should have proven that conservatism doesn't work in the 21st century anymore. There's no point, looking backwards at the good old days gets us nowhere. It just makes things worse at this point. But we still go on this self-destructive conservative path, and I'll never get it. But
what good old days, though? I mean, these guys are all longing for a period in time that never existed. It's all revisionist history, and I think that's the real problem. They want to bring us back to a place in time where, like when they talk about the good old days and you quiz them on it, what good old days are they talking about exactly? The good old days where corporations were taxed at 90%, the good old days where there were shortages and rationing. Those good old days? No, they just want the racism.
yeah.
they really, really love and are obsessed with the racism.
They
And
want
when
the
it really
racism,
comes
and
down to it, that's all they want.
they want the
They want to be
racism. They
able to
want the
hate people.
yeah, they want the racism. They want the classism. They want the times where kids were sent up chimneys to clean them. To clean them. They want the mass orphanages and the and the hotels. And those so-called hotels where you slept on ropes.
And
That's what. Yeah,
don't forget polio.
yeah. They
You
want
got that
polio,
too.
and yeah. That's what they pine for, and I'll never, and it just never ceases to amaze me. Now, maybe it's because I've always been progressive all my life that, how it is. When you're young, everything is there for your convenience and always existed. When you're born, it's always been there. When you're young, everything's new and exciting, and when you get old, everything new is off the table and should be destroyed. My my grandfather on my mother's side, he's always been a technical genius. That guy knows. That guy is now 104 years old, and he knows more about his laptop than I know about my entire PC setup. He was
Well,
he
that's a
invented.
shame.
Yeah, I know, right? He knows more about how to use. He can use Skype better than me. Okay, and you know how bad I am at Skype.
No, you're great at Skype.
But 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 then again, I'm also talking about the guy who invented the laser gyroscope, and that laser gyroscope was called what landed us on the moon. Was what landed us on the moon. So I guess I get a lot of my progressiveness from my grandfather. The fact that my grandfather never stopped, even in his twilight years, he never stopped enjoying new things. And
I think there's something to be said for that. I think when it comes down to it, somebody told me once that there are only two kinds of people in the world: those who listen to new music all their lives, and those who play the same old tune.
yeah,
And I felt like that was pretty profound because I'm one of those former people.
yeah.
Anything written before 2005 is worthless to me.
I mean, my grandfather was forgive me for being nostalgic for a minute, but my grandfather was so talented. You could give him a piece of cardboard and say, "Can you make me this?" And you give him the most complicated spaceship from Star Wars you could, and he'd put the cardboard together and he'd make this detailed Millennium Falcon out of cardboard. That was my grandfather, and I wish more of the world was like him. Yeah. It's amazing how Lovecraft Country gets us talking about all these different aspects of life when you think about it.
That's true. That's true, and we're having fun with it. The other thing I think that sets the real nerds apart from the fake nerds is that real nerds, go through and they love and enjoy this stuff. There's
Hmm.
positivity, there's joy. When you walk into a circle of fake nerds, what they want to tell you is that things are dying, that they're bleak, that this is the end of it.
Mm.
And I think that's the difference. I think that's what makes them fake nerds. It's also what gives them the rallying call. And I don't know.
Yeah,
I think when people say that this is over, your way of life is threatened. I think people buck up and pay attention. But I wish they wouldn't, because it's wrong. There's so much joy out there.
yeah, yeah. Well, I think we've nearly rounded up to a nice hour and a half. Conclusions. We really enjoyed Lovecraft Country. I think that's a given, and it certainly had a profound impact on how we see life. Yes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm so looking forward to the next season of Lovecraft Country.
And you'd agree there's definitely going to be one after that cliffhanger. There has to be.
I don't think there's any way there couldn't be.
Yeah.
I think the show is going to go on. It's going to continue. I want more, and I will personally pound down the doors at HBO if they don't give it to me.
Okay, so we'll just finish off. What's your theory? What do you think is going to happen to Tick? What do you think is going to happen to Dee? What do you think is going to happen to the family as a whole in the next season?
I think we're going to see more magic for sure. I think we're going to see more injustice as time moves forward a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're going to see them overcome the horrors of what they still have to overcome. And
Mm-hmm.
I think there's going to be a few shocks and a few surprises, but we're going to see them very, very early in the season.
Yeah. I think that Dee and Tick are the two characters. I'm focusing on. I'm pretty sure Tick's not really dead. They're probably going to do a Jon Snow on him, maybe.
It's true. Or, they could always pull him out of an alternate universe if they need to.
Yeah, which again is possible. But Dee is the character of interest for a lot of people, I think, right now. She is definitely the character that she to be honest with you, she was the most underplayed character in the entire series, and they gave her the best ending of the season.
They really did.
They really did. She was the character you thought everybody was going to underplay and ignore, like they did in episode 7, where they said, "Oh, we're going to find her," and then when they find her, they just leave her alone. Poor girl suffering, And I was not expecting anything from her in the last episode, and when she did what she did, I was like, this is bigger than we expected.
I think it's awesome because she's so fun and so pretty, and now we learn that she's a badass too, and that's exciting.
And she controls vampire
that makes
dogs.
me happy.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh God, yes.
Yeah. So I've had a wonderful hour and a half with you today. I'm looking forward for more. We should do Discovery next time, I think, because we should.
Originally, Josh, like I said.
Go on.
Like I said before, Josh, you are one of my absolute favorite people to talk to, and I'm happy to come back and talk about anything you like.
I appreciate that. All right, so I guess we'll sign off. I'm going to say goodbye to my audience. You have anything you want to say to my audience?
No, not really. See you next time.
All right, we'll see you guys next week. You take care of yourself, all right?
All righty.
Ciao.